Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. Enjoy.
Look, I wanted to start the show with the SEC projected order of finish. We now have that because it came out right after SEC Media Days wrapped up. I wanted to give you my personal projected SEC order of finish because I got some issues with this list. I mean, it was pretty much chalk in the SEC East, which is where we're going to start. I'll go ahead and give you the Eastern Division. This was the SEC preseason media poll. So this was the people that were at SEC Media Days. They got to vote on it. It gives you, in the graphic, it gives you the list of 1 through 7 as well as how many first place votes they had. In the East, it is easy to say that Georgia ran away with this. 265 first place votes. Tennessee was second with 14. So Georgia, once again, projected to just run through the Eastern Division. I have a tough time disagreeing with that, unfortunately. I think the dynasty out there that Kirby Smart is building is much too strong. I still believe the East is weaker than the West. I've always thought that was a weaker side of the conference. Second place, they have Tennessee. Not sure if I agree with that one. Followed by South Carolina 3, Kentucky 4, then Florida, Missouri, and Vanderbilt 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to kind of run over what I think is going to happen in the Eastern Division. We'll start from the bottom. This one's easy, Vanderbilt. I understand that, Clark Lee inspired a lot of people. Some people have some confidence in him because he won 5 games last year. I mean, he upsetted a Kentucky. He upsetted a Florida. It's so hard to replicate something like that at Vanderbilt. I mean, just look at it. We are praising this guy for going 5 and 7. That's because that never happens at Vanderbilt. I understand that they return their quarterback, but it's just going to be very hard from a sheer talent standpoint to be able to upset the number of teams you did 2 years in a row. I got them last in the conference. At 6, I got Missouri. Same thing with Vanderbilt. They were so far behind the 8 ball. I really thought Eli Drinkwitz was going to do a little bit more here. I thought he was a great coach at Appy State before they brought him up, but for whatever reason, it has not worked out for Eli. I mean, he's slowly starting to build back up, but I don't expect much from the Missouri Tigers this year. I got them at 6. At 5, I got the Florida Gators. Now, I told you yesterday they were one of my concerns as far as wrapping up SEC Media Days because they are rebuilding. What is Billy Napier going to do? We know he's losing Anthony Richardson. Who's the starting quarterback? You got Graham Mertz, you got Jack Miller. Those are probably the 2 guys that are vying for that starting job. I like Jack Miller. I think he's talented. He was in over his head in that bowl game. He was not ready to play. He's Ohio State transfer, much like our guy Joe Burrow, but wildly different results in their first action in the SEC. Not a ton of weapons on the outside. You got Ricky Pearsall, who you did bring to SEC Media Days, who I think is a really good receiver, but outside of him, I just think you're going to struggle to score points on the offensive side of the ball. I got them at 5th. I got Tennessee all the way down here at 4. I mean, yesterday they were my disappointing team in the SEC East. A lot of people are high on him, and everybody's like, well, Joe Milton's going to be fine. He's going to be able to do it. Is he? He hasn't done it anywhere he's been, including Tennessee 2 years ago when he was named the starter. He struggled out of the gate, was turning the ball over. They ultimately went to Hendon Hooker. You know what happened there. He finished out the 2021 season strong, and then last season would have been probably a Heisman finalist had he not tore his knee. You also have to replace Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt. That's a lot to replace. I mean, they got a few weapons back, but whenever you're replacing 2 receivers that were talented enough to go in the first round, they didn't because the draft class for wide receivers was so deep, but you're replacing a lot on the offensive side of the ball. I think they're going to take a step back on offense, and I'm not sure how much better their defense is actually going to be. So I could be completely wrong on this one. It's one of those things I'm going to have to see to believe, but I got Tennessee finishing 4th. 3rd, I'm going to go the Kentucky Wildcats. This is about where everybody has them. A couple people have them at 3, but they're kind of, at 2, but they're kind of falling in that 3 to 4 range. I think that's about right. I think Mark Stoops does a good job there. He typically gets them to 8 and 4. Sometimes he'll squeak in a 9 and 3, maybe even a 10 and 3, but you have a certain cap at Kentucky. I mean, let's just call it like it is. Devin Leary's coming in. I think he's a fine quarterback. Everybody's hyping him up. I'm not sure he's that much better, if at all better than Will Levis, and they struggled to put points on the board with Will Levis. Cavassier Smoke, one of their running backs, who was a pretty nice player. He's actually transferring out. He'll be playing with Deion Sanders at Colorado this year, so You lose that weapon as well. Obviously, you lose Will Levis, who went early in the second round of the NFL draft. I just think that there's a little bit too much question mark surrounding Kentucky for me to put them any higher than 3. At 2, this is my surprise team out of the East. I'm kind of on this hype train a little bit. I'm going the South Carolina Gamecocks. I am all in on Shane Beamer. I think he's one of the best young coaches in the SEC. Spencer Rattler comes back. Can he replicate what he did at the end of the season? I think he can. I think that he finally got comfortable. He finally has a coaching staff that believes in him. He doesn't have a Caleb Williams backing him up who's breathing down his neck. They were playing as good as anybody in the conference the last 3 or 4 games of the season. If they can have any sort of momentum from the end of the season, I think they can upset a lot of people this year. I think South Carolina's going to be pretty good. And number 1, I mean, you hate to go chalk, but you have to. They're just too talented. They're too good. That's the Georgia Bulldogs. You know, there's a lot of talk of, well, how do you replace Stetson Bennett? And look, I'm a bigger Stetson Bennett fan than most people. I think he's wildly underrated. He's a 2-time national champion. I understand that he was a walk-on. Doesn't matter. It's the old saying, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And he finished stronger than anybody in his college career. But people are sleeping on the Georgia quarterbacks here. I'm not one to just dwell on high school recruiting rankings. They got 3 5-stars in that quarterback room, though, including Carson Beck, who kind of seems like he's going to be the presumptive starter coming into the season. People are going to find out real quick how good Carson Beck is. I mean, look what that Georgia offense did for Stetson Bennett. Carson Beck is every bit as talented. He's not as mobile as Stetson. He's not going to take off and run as much, but the guy's got a big arm. He's tall. He can stand in the pocket and take the hits. He can make all the throws. They're still going to have weapons on the offensive side of the ball. They do return Kendall Milton. They got Brock Bowers, who, for my money, if somebody told me to place a bet on who was the best player in college football, regardless of position, I would probably go Brock Bowers. You know Kirby's going to have an elite defense. I don't see any way somebody upsets Georgia. I got them coming out of the East. As far as the West goes, this one gets a little bit interesting to me. There are a lot of people that are kind of running down Arkansas. I gave them as kind of my surprise team coming out of the West. I got them higher than you may think, but we're going to start at the bottom. At 7, I'm going to go Mississippi State. Look, they're in a tough spot. Zach Arnett had to take over probably before he's ready. We all know the tragedy surrounding Mike Leach and his untimely passing. Will Rogers is a great quarterback, but he had such a good connection. He talked about it at SEC Media Days of how much of a father figure like that Mike Leach was to him. How is he going to respond to that? He's going to be coached by someone new. Will the offense remain the same? That was one of the things that people liked about the Mike Leach offense. He was a genius at finding those mismatches. Can the next guy find those mismatches? They hired a pretty solid offensive coordinator, in my opinion, but he's no Mike Leach. I got them at 7. At 6, I'm going Auburn. A lot of people really high on Hugh Freeze. I think Hugh Freeze is a good coach. I think he gets in his own way a lot of the times. I thought that happened a bunch of times at Ole Miss. He kind of folded in those big games. Now, granted, he didn't have the talent, and he was fired a little prematurely for, his off-the-field shenanigans, but I do think Hugh Freeze is a good coach. Auburn doesn't have a ton of talent. I think Robbie Ashford is very limited at the quarterback position. Peyton Thorne's a solid player. He's kind of a middle-of-the-road QB. He's also coming in late, though. He wasn't even there for spring practice. If he's going to wind up being that starter, he's going to have to pick things up in a hurry. How fast can he do that? I think Hugh Freeze will ultimately have success at Auburn. I think it's going to take him 2, maybe even 3 years before we really see that impact out there in Auburn. At number 5, I'm going the Texas A&M Aggies. Look, they were my disappointing team yesterday. What is Connor Wegman going to do? He's going to have to take a big leap forward. A big leap forward. They have those weapons on the outside. Evan Stewart was great last year. Moose Muhammad stepped up in the biggest moments possible. He led them to a couple wins that they probably shouldn't have gotten. Anaya Smith, he's going to be that veteran presence. That guy in the slot, you may line him up in the backfield for a little bit, but you're losing Devon Achane, who, he was the heartbeat of your team. He was your offense. Everything flowed through him. You kind of passed to set up the run last year for A&M, if you will. He was your guy. He saved Jimbo a lot last year. You're also bringing in a new offensive coordinator, Bobby Petrino, but what's going to happen there? Is he calling plays? Is Jimbo calling plays? When Jimbo was questioned about it at SEC Media Days, he was kind of non-committal one way or the other. He goes, yeah, well, Bobby's in and he's got a a good resume behind him. I don't think it's as good as most people do, but, he also goes, but, I'm still going to have my hand in things a little bit. That doesn't inspire a ton of confidence in me. Their offensive line still going to be a little shaky. They should be solid on the defensive side, but I do think they're going to struggle to put up points against some of the better defenses in the conference. So I got them all the way down at 5. At 4, I'm going the Ole Miss Rebels. I mean, I don't see why Ole Miss could be any higher than this. Look, Quinshon Judkins is a great player. Outside of him, though, you don't return a ton. I mean, you got kind of a 3-way quarterback battle with Jackson Dart, Spencer Sanders, and Walker Howard. Howard kind of took the risk, was like, I don't want to sit for 2 years behind Daniels and Nussmeier. I'm leaving and going to Oxford. Well, he's probably their third-team guy there as well. Everyone assumed Spencer Sanders was going to come in, take the reins as the Oklahoma State transfer, the 5th-year senior quarterback. He hasn't done that, and all reports out of Oxford is that Jackson Dart's actually going to be that guy. He was shaky last year. I know Kiffin can work wonders, but how much better is he going to get? I think they're going to drop a couple. This team's talented. I think they're going to drop a couple games that they probably shouldn't. At 3, I'm going the Arkansas Razorbacks. Again, they were my surprise team coming out of the West. They were bad last year, sure, but a lot of that was injury related. I mean, they still have the talent. KJ Jefferson, he's been at Arkansas for like 7 years. He's played a lot of big games. He's won a lot of big games. We know he can run. He can stay in there. He can take the hits. If he can stay healthy, him and Raheem Sanders in the backfield, who again, Quinshon Judkins, like I mentioned again at Ole Miss, he's a good running back. Sanders might be better. He's kind of flying under the radar here this year. He's more of a between the tackles runner. I think he's a little bit more of a complete back right now. I think Sam Pittman's a really good coach. I think those guys genuinely like playing for him. I'm going the Arkansas Razorbacks. Here's where it gets interesting. At number 2, I'm going Alabama. The media projected them to go 1. I get it. No one wants to have the hot take of, oh, at the end of the year, I'm the one with my tail between my legs because I didn't pick Alabama. I get it. Saban's there. They have the dynasty. They are who they are, but they're going to struggle this year at quarterback. I truly believe that. Tyler Buckner, in my opinion, is going to win that job. It's either him or Ty Simpson. Do we have confidence in either of those guys? I mean, Ty Simpson's basically completely unknown. He's played very, very sparingly. Tyler Buckner comes in from Notre Dame. He follows Tommy Rees, and you're like, yeah, well, there's that connection. He wasn't there in spring camp, and they said a lot of the terminology and philosophy of a Bill O'Brien is going to be carried over, so it's not going to be entirely Tommy Rees's offense, and I just don't think Tommy Rees and Tyler Buckner were that good at Notre Dame. Bama's going to be good on the defensive side, but I still think they're lacking a little bit of receiver. They lost their most important player, who in my opinion was not Bryce Young. It was Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, that guy was all over the field. He was probably the best running back in the conference last season. That is a whole lot to replace with Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs. And finally, at number 1, maybe my homerism is showing a little bit. I got the LSU Tigers. Not only do they return the most, I think they might be the deepest. I mean, they're probably the most talented team in the West. When you look at the all-SEC preseason selections, they got 6 first-team players. That's the most of any team in the West. They got Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, and Will Campbell on offense. You got Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, and Harold Perkins on defense. I mean, those 6 guys, they're as good as anybody in the conference, and they're at key positions. You have the first-team quarterback, you have the first-team left tackle, the first-team number 1 wide receiver. Then you're clogging that middle. Your 2 defensive tackles and your soon-to-be middle linebacker or first team. I mean, if you can win on the outside on offense and then have a solid front 7 on defense, that's always a recipe for success. And then the other 5 guys, Mason Taylor coming back at tight end. We saw him make so many big plays. He's on second team. Slade Roy at long snapper and Nathan Dybert at kickoff specialist, which didn't really know they voted on those. They made second team anyways for what it's worth. Props to those guys. But again, you got a first team All-SEC left tackle. You got an All-SEC right tackle as well. Emory Jones made third team. And then you got Major Burns as that free safety. He's going to probably be the captain of that defense. He's your most veteran DB back there, has the most experience. I like everything I'm seeing from this team. In my opinion, Kelly actually overachieved a little bit in year 1. I don't see why he can't take that next step in year 2. Maybe not a national title just yet, and don't crucify me for saying that. I think they're still 1 year away, but I don't see why this team can't win the SEC West and really give Georgia a run for their money.
Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.